KREM 2 News begins now.
It's been a busy news week in Spokane and the rest of the inland Northwest. Thank you for joining us here on KREM 2 Plus for Week in Review. I'm Tim Pham. Here now is a look at some of the biggest news stories from this past week.
It's hard to believe at one point there was 600 people living on this single plot of state-owned land, and now there's just 65 left. Julie Garcia with Jules Helping Hands hopes to continue to shrink that number. An end could be in sight for the homeless encampment off of I-90. Only an estimated 65 people still live behind these fences.
Our end goal, ours, WashDOT, Commerce, is the city, the East Central neighborhood. Our goal is all the same, to decommission this camp and to close Camp Hope.
Back in December, WashDOT counted nearly 200 people living at the camp. Julie Garcia says she's been helping people move into the Catalyst Project, Hope House, and other available housing.
People shouldn't be sleeping outside in our community, and that's where our focus needs to be.
Garcia says there have been no new people to stay at the camp since October. She worries closing the Cannon shelter will put people on the streets, since staying at the camp isn't an option.
Those folks are then going to go look for beds available. And we have a hard enough time right now keeping folks out of the camp. So people who want to be part of Camp Hope, even though we're not taking new guests, they still come here every day.
A proposal to close the shelter at the end of May recommends 80 beds be absorbed into the trench shelter. But Garcia says it won't be an option that works for everyone.
It's not a reality. We can try to force them, but we see what force does. It just makes them angry. It just deepens their trauma.
She says this move could add to already visible problems.
We're doing the same thing as Camp Hope at the track shelter to that neighborhood. And we can see it by you no longer see police officers here because they're all there. Because the same thing happens no matter what group of people you bring into one area. When you bring 300 of them, it brings along all of the other things that come along with bringing 300 people to a new community. And they're seeing the impact of that now at track.
Garcia says the closure won't directly affect the timeline to close the camp. But she does say if more people end up on the streets, her organization will have to devote more time to support those people. WashDOT says it is scheduling another fence move in early April to continue to shrink the perimeter of the camp, as well as do people counts on a bi-weekly basis. In Spokane, Janelle Finch, KREM 2 News.
I spoke with Spokane's communications director, who tells me the city is still pretty early on in the discussions of what could happen here at the Cannon Street shelter, but those talks could soon turn to action. The proposal is to close this site after May 31st.
There's a lot of talk about the future of the Cannon Street shelter.
It's a conversation we're having, and we're talking about what it would look like if it does close at the end of May.
The Salvation Army has run the shelter since late last year, and now the city of Spokane is looking to close it.
Are we starting the transition now of Cannon shelter beds to the Trent? When will that process actually begin?
And absorb the 80 or so beds here into the Trent Resource and Assistance Center. The Urban Experience Committee heard a request Monday to amend the contract with the Salvation Army to end May 31st. Giving the organization money to operate until then.
At a total of $800,000, which will come from reallocated Department of Commerce Shelter Program grant funding.
But for all this talk,
if it wasn't for these people, we wouldn't have no place to go.
William hasn't heard anything about it. He's here 7 days a week, an easy spot to walk from, and he feels one of the only options for he and his girlfriend.
No, if you're a couple, if you're single, I mean, the Union Gospel Mission only gives you 90 days. These guys give you for however long.
The city is now discussing how to transition people out of Cannon while talking of what this site could become.
We've been starting conversations with other potential providers for that fragile medical shelter that Cannon could then transition into.
The leading idea is to transform the shelter into a respite care facility. Brian Coddington says Spokane is moving toward a regional approach to homelessness, partnering with Spokane Valley and the county to address other gaps in service.
We're continuing to evolve. We think we made significant steps in the system, and there's more work to do.
Though without Cannon here, William wonders what gap he'll fall through.
Stay in our car and hopefully the cops don't run us off.
I did speak with more people who stay at the Cannon Street shelter, and a lot of them say they have never been to the Trent shelter. And some of them tell me they don't plan to go there if Cannon shelter closes. They'll just go back to the streets. Shannon Mowdy, KREM 2 News.
City council members heard hours of public testimony tonight from realtors and developers asking them not to pass an ordinance that would dramatically increase general facilities charges or the fees builders have to pay for new sewer and water hookups.
With these new fees, you are ensuring unaffordability in our city. The additional costs will cause thousands of homeowners to not be able to afford the payment on a house they could have afforded yesterday.
Mayor Woodward warned the ordinance would immediately add $21,000 to the price of building a home, essentially pricing even more people out of Spokane's housing market. Woodward says fees do need to be increased to help pay for critical infrastructure upgrades, but the ordinance council members discussed could increase fees in some areas 1,400%, according to Councilman Jonathan Bingle.
These costs have not gone up since 2002. There's no denying that these costs need to go up. However, the degree to which they need to go up is something that should be subject to a much longer public engagement process. And so the interim fee that I came up with was just a simple CPI adjusted number for the fees, which from 2002 until today would be 66%. And so on a 1-inch water connection, that would take things from $1,200 to $2,000, and the sewer connection would go from $2,400 to $4,000.
Tonight, council members were not willing to substitute Bingle's plan. Utility hookup fees for new homes in central Spokane are now $10,284. Homes in outer Spokane will pay more than $17,000. However, council members said they would take the next several weeks to discuss the rate increases and likely modify them. In Spokane, Kyle Simchuk, KREM 2 News.
Well, the Spokane Association of Realtors claims these new fees will shut down 2,000 construction projects in the middle of a housing crisis. Councilman Jonathan Bingle says the city needs to work with developers, not against them. He's negotiating with other council members to find common ground.
They're called general facilities charges. Developers pay them when building new homes, and the city uses the money to improve critical infrastructure like roads or water and sewer access. Those fees haven't changed much since 2002, but Spokane has, and the city needs more money to expand. But Councilman Jonathan Bingle says those gaps can't be closed overnight.
You're talking close to $30,000 worth of fees that were added overnight to those developments.
Bingle worries the dramatic jump in fees will price even more people out of Spokane's housing market, and he's already hearing from developers.
I got an email today about a 77-lot development that was going in, and they had originally allotted $186,000 for GFCs, and that number is well over $2 million now. And when you're talking about us trying to substantially increase the amount of housing, this is something that will have an impact, and people need to understand that.
Bingle and Councilman Cathcart voted against the ordinance and instead suggested raising fees 66%. They're now in negotiations with other council members, and Bingle hopes the ordinance will be amended in a few weeks. He says the city and developers need to find common ground.
Thousands of units are affected by this, and we need to make sure that we're not shooting ourselves in the foot.
The Spokane Association of Realtors surveyed the top 100 builders in the region and claimed 73% of them said they would be stopping projects immediately unless something changes.
For the first time since the 1980s, voters in Kootenai County last night shot down the Coeur d'Alene School District's supplemental levy, which makes up 1/4 of their annual budget.
That's 1 in every 4 employees. That means that things that we have believed in for a long time in this community, things like sports, things like arts, things like some of our safety officers, nurses.
The supplemental levy, which would have replaced the expiring one, failed by just 361 votes. In an interview with our news partner, the Coeur d'Alene Press, Superintendent Sean Hawker says the district will have to regroup and decide how to move forward, adding the loss of funding will have a significant impact. In a report last year published by the National Education Association, the state of Idaho ranked 51st in the nation when it came to student spending. CDA schools also asked voters to pass a safety and maintenance levy, which needed 55% approval to pass, but came up short by roughly 0.5%, marking the second time the facilities levy has failed since August. The district maintains 41 buildings, a third of them more than 30 years old. The district says it'll be unable to address its maintenance backlog, which they estimate will balloon to $100 million within 10 years. Kyle Simchuk, KREM 2 News.
The Oracle Cerner computer system has been plagued with issues since it was rolled out. Right now, it's currently in place at 5 VA medical centers, including right here in Spokane at the Mann Grandstaff VA Medical Center.
On Wednesday, the U.S. Senate Committee on Veterans Affairs held a hearing about the future of the Oracle Cerner computer system and to discuss the issues it's seen since it was implemented. The hearing comes one day after senators say VA officials told them about the deaths linked to the computer system. In that hearing, Senator Richard Blumenthal of Connecticut said his staff heard from VA officials 4 people died, including one in Spokane. Senator Patty Murray shared her frustrations at the hearing.
Now, I have heard from providers who are now burnt out trying to navigate this broken interface on top of what has already been an incredibly trying time for healthcare workers. And I have heard directly from my constituents who have received a late cancer diagnosis because of the flaws in the system and everything in between. None of this is okay.
The VA signed a contract with Cerner, which is now owned by Oracle, for $10 billion over 10 years. The new electronics health record computer system initially rolled out in Spokane first in 2020. Other locations using the system now include VA medical centers in Walla Walla and Roseburg, Oregon. According to the VA, further rollout of the health record system to other locations was delayed until this June to address its issues.
The current contract with Oracle Cerner ends in May. In Spokane, Cody Proctor, KREM 2 News.
Well, we don't have all the info those documents could hold. They were released with many redactions and some pieces are still sealed. But they do paint a picture of how this investigation unfolded over time.
More than 60 documents released last week give insight into how investigators and prosecutors are making a case against Brian Coburger.
The volume of warrants that have been issued in this case indicate to me that they're casting quite a wide net, and they're trying to collect as much information as possible.
That includes some warrants dating back to November, in the days after 4 University of Idaho students were killed.
We're almost getting a retrospective view of where the investigation was back in December, and that is not necessarily where the investigation is now.
Attorney Mo Hamoudi says some of the warrants are standard, including those for the social media accounts, financial records, and phone data for the suspect, as well as Xana Kernodle, Madison Mogan, Ethan Chapin, and Kaylee Gonzalez.
One thing you do as investigators when you're trying to establish what has happened to a particular victim is you want to understand who they associated with.
We know from the affidavit that investigators had identified Coburger as a person of interest as early as November 25th. There are warrants for his phone data, Tinder account, and other social media. And it appears police were trying to track down K-bar knives and sheaths, like the sheath found at the scene, requesting surveillance and records from Walmart, Amazon, even the manufacturer.
You're trying to piece together circumstances to connect a transaction, a purchase of a knife from Walmart to a type of knife that may have been discovered at the crime scene.
But Hamoudi cautions we can't assume too much, even with all this information now out. There are still pieces under seal and much more that'll likely be held to preserve this case until trial.
What we don't have is the story put out to the judge to get all of those initial warrants, nor do we have the information they obtained from those warrants and where they are now.
Coburger is due back in court for a preliminary hearing on June 26th. The entire week has been set aside by the courts for both sides to present evidence. Shannon Mowdy, KREM 2 News.
Joseph's family has put up these posters around the Gonzaga area. They're hoping someone out there knows something. What they discovered inside his apartment is raising even more red flags.
I want Joe to know that we love him so much.
That's the message Annie Kamau wants her son to hear, or anyone who knows what happened in the early morning hours of March 3rd, when 20-year-old Joseph Kamau was last seen at his apartment.
Joe is a nice, obedient child who gets along with people.
Joseph worked at the McDonald's on Hamilton near Gonzaga and lived a short distance away in these apartments on East Cleveland. His mom says he would call her every day, and did the day before he disappeared.
Was checking on me, and it was a normal thing. He always calls to check on me, see how I'm doing.
Joseph didn't show up for work the next day, and when his family went to his apartment to check on him, they immediately suspected foul play. A window was shattered. Joseph wasn't inside, but his cell phone, computer, and keys were, according to the family. It's been more than 2 weeks since they've heard from him.
The siblings, we do not have peace. We want him home.
Joseph is a 2019 graduate of Shadle Park High School and a member of the Kenyan community. His mom says he liked to play basketball and go to the gym in his spare time and rarely went out alone.
Everybody feels so bad without him. We want him to be with us. We just need him because he's part of us.
If you know anything about Joseph's whereabouts, you're asked to call Crime Check, that number 456-2233. In Spokane, Kyle Simchuk, KREM 2 News.
Schools across Idaho are awaiting that decision at the Capitol to know how to move forward with transgender bathroom policies. And that includes here in Coeur d'Alene, where earlier this week the district's lack of a defined policy led to one heated board meeting.
Idaho's bathroom bill is moving on to the next legislative step, with debate at the Capitol.
And the rights here for young girls to be safe and secure when they go to school in this most vulnerable position.
Extremely concerned about this trend of legislation by intimidation.
And North Idaho. As first reported by our partners at the Coeur d'Alene Press, the issue at the heart of the bill came to a head in the Coeur d'Alene School District last week.
I think there's been a reluctance to develop a policy because it's a hot button topic. But I think the time has come that we must have a policy. So I think regardless of what happens with Senate Bill 1100, it'd be in our best interest to develop a policy.
Julie Klennert, a Coeur d'Alene senior, says a transgender student was using the girls' restroom, making her afraid.
A women's bathroom is for privacy and where we are vulnerable. To add males in this place, it leaves women defenseless.
Many people are angry the district doesn't already have an enforceable policy. Others called for the end of the political fighting and to compromise.
I think that this misplaced outrage here in this room tonight is resulting in an uptick in anti-LGBTQ+ bullying. We're seeing it in my kids' school, even at the elementary school level.
Senate Bill 1100 requires schools to provide reasonable accommodations, something Superintendent Sean Hawker says Coeur d'Alene's been doing for around a decade already.
Every transgender student that I'm aware of wants to use a private bathroom facility to avoid exactly what's happened this past week.
In anticipation of the law passing, Hawker advised the board to use the April workshop to come up with the new policy.
If that bill passes the legislature and is signed by Governor Brad Little, the law will take effect July 1st. Shannon Mowdy, KREM 2 News.
PepsiCo's purchase of Corwin Beverage is a major blow to small craft brewers in Washington. That's because it leaves those brewers with no simple way to deliver product to grocery stores, restaurants, and bars. Two of Corwin's smaller distributors, Kendall's Pioneer and Broar Polska, will likely shut down because of the purchase by PepsiCo. These closures don't directly impact any Spokane area breweries, but they're especially damaging to those in southwestern Washington. 10 Pin Brewing in Moses Lake is one of them.
Hopefully we can keep our product on the shelf even though it's coming from a different truck.
CEO Cale Russell says Kendall Pioneer isn't their only distributor, but he's hoping customers won't notice the impacts for very long.
It's on us to find a new distributor to sort of make sure that we're still we're still able to get our product in front of the same customers that have always had it. And so there's a potential for a lag there.
He says this trend of big companies consolidating smaller distributors is becoming more common.
They seem to either gobble up territory or sort of decide that maybe that territory is not beneficial for their business. 10
Pin Brewing is established and big enough that Russell says it can keep up with big changes like this. But that's not the case for smaller breweries trying to expand their reach with distributors that continue getting gobbled up.
You feel bad for the guys that just got started and just started, sort of putting all of their attention and funds into these distributors, and then it's kind of like the rug's pulled out from under them.
The shutdown of the 2 southwestern Washington distributors is a concerning trend for the Washington Brewers Guild. The nonprofit alliance said in a statement that continued consolidation means less options for local craft breweries to choose from. And while this impacts all Washington craft brewers, it says this is particularly harmful to smaller breweries. Amanda Rowley, KREM 2 News.
Emily Watts says her WSU sophomore was excited to move into the Aspen Heights Pullman apartments. But after months and months of delays, her daughter needed to find temporary housing. Now the housing complex is saying that temporary housing needs to be permanent because this project isn't getting done anytime soon. WSU parent Emily Watts says her Aspen Heights concerns began in August, but started out small.
We received a call right before they were supposed to move in August that things weren't going to be ready for like a couple weeks. They were going to move in about mid-September.
A delay wasn't ideal, but Watts wasn't too worried.
We could stick it out for about a month and that would be fine.
A 1-month delay turned into 7.
It was getting pushed back further and further.
During this time, Watts says the apartment complex provided rent-free temporary housing at another location.
It's just really unsettling to have your kids far away and to just not feel like they had a place to call her. I mean, she's living out of boxes still at times, so it's just been difficult.
Finally, a glimmer of hope.
And they finally got notice that they were able to move in at the end of February.
A hope that was short-lived.
The students all received a notification, at least my daughter did, on February 20th that they were no longer going to be able to uphold their end of the lease. So they were releasing the students of the lease and they needed to find either a place to live by March 15th or they needed to start paying rent where they were originally living rent-free.
Watts says she feels like the company left students behind.
It just feels strange that you can just release yourself from a lease and not uphold your end of the bargain. This just feels like they were abandoned and they're just kind of stranded.
Paying rent at the temporary housing could lead to another problem.
Currently, where they're being required to pay rent where they weren't originally supposed to goes through the end of July. And a lot of these places that they want to live next year, the lease starts June 1st. And so the students are now having to pay rent at 2 different places.
Watts says her daughter found a short-term lease through May and new housing for next year.
Glad to have that behind us.
But even with that solution, Watts says the apartment company still needs to be held accountable for stringing its tenants along this far. We've reached out to Aspen Heights several times for comment and have not heard back. A maintenance worker at the apartment complex next to the old Aspen Heights site told me they actually had to take in 140 tenants because these apartments were never ready. In Pullman, Janelle Finch, KREM 2 News.
For the Wall Street Diner in the Garland District, a spot that's been open since 1949. There's history in and on the walls. But now there are reminders of a more recent past.
Yep, that's the only one, but it's just breaking apart as it's in there.
On the doors and windows, too. Manager Jessica Patchen.
Yeah, there's 3 in this one, and that one was a few weeks ago that we originally thought was just a rock.
Was the first to see the damage Sunday night. An alarm tipped them off to the broken glass, shot by what they think was a BB gun.
They literally got nothing out of this, so I don't understand why someone would just be around shooting out windows and businesses, small businesses at that.
The milk bottle was hit just a couple weeks ago and had to replace a glass door in the middle of a busy lunch day.
It didn't go all the way through, but it just shattered this
glass door.
Owner Tom Ritchie is just as baffled.
I know, I'm like, every customer leaves happy here. You know what I mean? It's like, why? So it's obviously not a customer. I don't know. Yeah, it's just senseless.
And just as frustrated. As a small business owner, it's his job to not only wash the windows, but pay for the repairs too. And he assumes there won't be any sort of payback.
I called Crime Check, and I still haven't heard back from a report or a cop.
We just don't report it necessarily because there's not really anything they're going to do about it.
So for now, what's been broken has been boarded up.
Are you guys ready?
But there are other things not so easily repaired. Shannon Mowdy.
I don't know how to stop it. You know?
KREM 2 News.
When 911 is called, law enforcement is expected to answer. Every now and then, the emergency calls for help from above.
It serves to protect both the officers responding, but it also, even more so, serves to protect the public by having somebody overhead watching what's going on.
Megan Fine piloted Spokane County's first all-women law enforcement flight. According to the Spokane County Sheriff's Office, not only was it the first in the county, but the first in Washington state. The civilian pilot was joined by flight officers Spokane Valley Police Deputy Crystal Bitzer and Spokane Police Officer Michaela McKittrick.
It's super cool for the unit. It's really cool, again, to be a part of, just with how few of us are in the unit. It was kind of special for all of us to pick this flight.
The Sheriff's Office says Saturday, the 3-women crew assisted with calls of a missing child, a carjacking, and an assault.
There's a lot of unique experiences that you have in the air versus on the ground. You see things differently, tactically.
Fine says this historic flight is the result of women who overcame previous gender expectations.
It's important to remember for people who were excluded kind of in the past that they've earned their stripes and they're now active parts of the team.
She says it sends a message to young girls that they're capable of anything.
If you want to be a pilot, be a pilot. If you want to be a doctor, be a doctor. If you want to be a policeman, be a policeman.
It's a message Fine also tells herself. Not only is she a history-making female pilot, when she's not spending time in the sky, she's studying as a medical student at WSU. Janelle Finch, KREM 2 News.
March is all about madness.
We on TV, come on.
Madness that brings schools together.
Yeah, no, there's definitely some trash talking going on between classes. And there's some plotting and stuff.
Kelsey Delp is one of more than 1,500 students that are taking part in North Central's attendance bracket to help students attend class. Kelsey has already seen a difference.
Because I really like when our full family is at school, and you can definitely tell the difference when everyone's here, and you can tell that in March, people have been making the effort to show up.
Here's how it works. Every week, each teacher is ranked on how well their classes are attended throughout their 6 periods. The teacher with the highest percentage of attendance for that week is ranked first. Based on where they're ranked, each teacher is given a seat to compete against another teacher, just like the March Madness bracket.
The only point here is to win and dominate, and then rub it in every teacher's face who did not win.
Chris Clay came up with the attendance bracket. He says the bracket brings back fun to the classroom.
Our students are enduring a lot right now, whether it's mental stress, emotion, trying to take care of their emotional well-being, and it allows our staff to engage with them in a way that they may enjoy.
Another Spokane school is taking their own twist to the month. Salk Middle School features what they like to call March Dadness.
But seriously, we don't have to worry about aliens visiting us anyway on Earth. We only have a 1-star rating. Okay, sorry for all the bad puns. That's how I roll.
They have a bracket where students vote on which teacher has the best jokes. The votes are done weekly after teachers tell their jokes on the announcements.
March in middle school can be a trying time. It's kind of a long month, and we just try to have fun and break it up a little bit.
Matt McFarland, the school's principal, says it's the best time of the year to show his students teachers are people too.
Batman 251, that's an all-time classic. Most Batman collectors, it's a must-have. My name's Grant Sahayko, and I'm the co-owner of Grant Sahayko Auctions with my wife Gina. Cool story with this one is the consignor is a woman in Spokane who got this as a teenager, took really good care of it. We're looking at an auction estimate of $3,000 to $4,000 on this comic book because she took such great care of it. Today I have picked out some of my favorite items that are in this week's collectibles auctions that are on Wednesday and Thursday. Let's first look at the George Washington letter. So I've only had 2 in my career. This is a really nice example of a George Washington signed letter done in Fredericksburg, 1778. The condition is about as nice as I've seen when you compare others to it. You can expect a letter like this to sell at auction for anywhere from $20,000 up to $50,000. We've got it going to the highest bidder on Wednesday. We had a $15,000 bid to start. The difference, there's a range of $20,000 to $50,000, really can be the content of the letter. He's acknowledging the discharge of 2 men that are coming up, and he just wants to be notified when that comes through. Then we have the Abraham Lincoln document. This one is showing some interest in pre-bidding. I believe it's up to $5,500 right now. These came from an estate in Alabama. And then the book here signed by Martin Luther King Jr. This is a first edition, second printing. We've got an auction estimate on that at I believe $4,000 to $6,000. I've been dealing in collectibles for about 35 years now. I got started as a kid just interested in collecting sports memorabilia, and then quickly learned that there was an opportunity to do something that I love and turn it into a career. If you really have something that you want to have somebody look at, you want to just take it to an expert and have them look at it. And for most of us in this profession, we'll look at things for no charge for people. Someone might have a baseball card they think is important and they want to run it by me. They'll send me pictures or text me pictures. A lot of times it does come down to condition, but that only is really for more recent things. If we're talking a 100 to 125-year-old baseball card, it can be in poor condition and still be worth 5-6 figures.
Thank you for joining us here on KREM 2 Plus for a look at some of the biggest news stories in the past week in Spokane and the rest of the Inland Northwest. For the most up-to-date news throughout the weekend, you can watch our very latest newscast right here on KREM 2 Plus. Just look for them in the bottom navigation menu. I'm Tim Pham. Thanks for watching.